It was the stillness that struck me most, like the silence that comes just before a storm. Standing on the bridge of the Resolute, I watched as the Empire's fleet loomed just outside our borders, a distant cluster of pinpricks on the tactical map. The lights of their warships glittered against the dark expanse, taunting us with their arrogance. They thought they could encroach on our space again without consequences. My breath was steady, even as my fists clenched behind my back. Our time had come. After years of preparing, gathering resources, and building alliances in secret, we were ready to make our stance. This wasn't about survival anymore, it was about sending a message. "Commander, you're going to wear holes in the deck if you keep pacing like that." JT's voice cut through the silence. His grin was lopsided, a hint of humor that didn't reach his eyes. He stood at ease, arms crossed, his gaze sharp as he watched the Empire's slow, creeping advance on the display. "Pacing keeps my mind clear, JT," I replied, half grinning despite myself. "Gives me time to think about how we're going to welcome our uninvited guests." "They're sure taking their sweet time," JT said, glancing at the tactical officer for a reading. "Almost as if they think they're above us." "They do," I said, with no attempt to hide the steel in my voice. The Empire's arrogance was almost too much to bear. Years of oppression, of control, of protection, at the expense of our dignity and freedom, it had taken its toll on all of us. But today, that would change. We had given them one warning a month ago: leave human space or face our resistance. But they had laughed, their ambassadors muttering about fledgling species and small ambitions. They had no idea what we were capable of. The last light on the communication panel blinked green, signaling we were ready. My fingers brushed over the console, activating the outbound message. "This is Commander Elias Kane of the United Human Defense Fleet," I began, letting each word carry the weight of my conviction. "You are entering restricted space. We have warned you once before. Turn back now, or we will consider this an act of war." There was silence, and for a moment, I thought they might actually listen. Then, a deep, authoritative voice crackled over the speakers. "This is Admiral Varric of the 8th Imperial Armada," he replied, sounding almost amused. "Commander Kane, it would be wise to reconsider your position. Surrender now, and we can discuss terms. Defiance will only bring destruction." JT rolled his eyes, muttering, "Classic Imperial arrogance." "Admiral Varric," I responded, steel lining my words, "I think you're the one who should reconsider. Your armada may be impressive, but it's on the wrong side of history." Silence. Then the line clicked off. My tactical officer, Lieutenant Marquez, gave a quick glance at the screen. "Commander, the Empire fleet's moving into formation. They're deploying forward units." I exhaled, feeling the tension lift. This was it. Our first real test of strength against the Empire. "Marquez, begin evasive maneuvers. JT, prepare the gunners for their first volley. It's time to show the Empire exactly who they're dealing with." The lights on the bridge dimmed as the Resolute banked left, slipping into position as the Empire's first salvo arced through space. Their weapons lit up the darkness, beams of plasma streaking toward us with deadly precision. But our shields held. For now. "Return fire," I ordered, and JT relayed the command, his voice calm and steady. The Resolute's guns roared to life, sending a blistering response across the void. I watched the display as our shots pounded against the Empire's forward units, scattering their ranks and forcing them to recalibrate their approach. JT glanced over at me, his face a mix of exhilaration and tension. "Think they're regretting this yet?" "If they aren't, they will be soon," I replied. "Keep up the pressure. Make them work for every inch." For a few minutes, the space between us and the Empire's fleet became a maelstrom of fire and light. Their ships were larger, more powerful, but we were faster, more agile, and we knew how to hit where it hurt. As JT barked commands, his voice filling the bridge with that sharp-edged calm he was known for, I felt a surge of pride. We weren't just defending our territory, we were fighting for something far more important. This battle would mark a turning point in our history, The moment humanity stepped out of the Empire's shadow and took its rightful place among the stars. "Commander, incoming transmission from the lead Empire ship," Marquez said, breaking into my thoughts. I raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it." Admiral Vurick's voice crackled back to life, less smug now. "Commander Kane, this is your last chance. Surrender, and we'll spare your people needless suffering." I clenched my jaw. "The only suffering here, Admiral, is yours, and it's just beginning." I cut the transmission, looking at JT. "Prepare the fleet for a coordinated strike. Target their flagship. Let's see how long they keep talking once we've knocked out their command." "Aye, Commander," JT replied, his face a mask of fierce determination. As the battle intensified, the Resolute danced among the Empire's ships, weaving between their hulking behemoths with a grace they couldn't match. Each hit we took rattled the hull, but our shields held firm, and our counterattacks were relentless. Just as we were lining up for a strike on the enemy flagship, Dr. Wren Adams appeared on the bridge. He was calm, his expression a sharp contrast to the chaos around him. "Eli, are you sure about this?" Wren asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're pushing hard, and they'll retaliate. Harder than we've seen." I met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "This isn't just about this battle, Wren. It's about showing the Empire we won't back down." Wren nodded slowly, but there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. I knew he questioned the cost of our defiance, and part of me couldn't blame him. But the time for fear was past. We'd given them our warning, and now we'd show them what it meant. The Empire's flagship loomed ahead, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons. It was their pride, their symbol of dominance, and we were about to shatter it. "Target their engines," I ordered. "Let's cripple their movement." JT's fingers flew over his console, directing the gunners. A volley of plasma fire streaked across the void, slamming into the Empire flagship's engines. Sparks flew as the ship lurched, its forward momentum halting abruptly. "They're dead in the water," JT exclaimed, a glint of triumph in his eyes. "Good," I said, my voice as cold as the void outside. "Now let's finish this." Our fleet closed in, hammering the Empire's ships with relentless precision. Their formation faltered, their commanders struggling to maintain control. For the first time, the Empire was on the defensive, and it was a sight I relished. "Commander Kane," Marquez called, "we're getting reports from Allied outposts. They're picking up the Empire's distress signals. Looks like they didn't expect this kind of resistance." "Let them signal," I said. "Let the whole galaxy see that humanity won't be cowed." The battle dragged on, but as the minutes passed, it became clear the Empire's forces were losing ground. Their fleet, though vast and well-armed, was fractured, disorganized. They hadn't prepared for an enemy willing to fight to the last. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Empire's ships began to retreat. One by one, they turned tail, their engines flaring as they broke formation and pulled back. JT let out a breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "They're actually running." "We showed them what they're up against," I replied. "This isn't the end, but it's a beginning." As the last of the Empire's ships disappeared into the depths of space, a hush fell over the bridge. We'd done it. We'd pushed them back, defied their arrogance, and sent a message that humanity wouldn't be controlled. For a moment, I let myself savor the victory, but I knew it was only the first step. The Empire would return, stronger and angrier than before, and when they did, we would be ready. "We've got a long road ahead of us," I said, my voice carrying across the bridge. "But we've taken the first step. Today, we showed them that humanity will fight for its future." There was a murmur of agreement, the quiet pride of a crew who'd faced down a giant and lived to tell the tale. JT clapped me on the shoulder, his grin as fierce as the battle we'd just won. "So, Commander," he said, "what's our next move?" I looked out at the stars, the endless darkness that stretched before us. The Empire would come again, and when they did, we would be waiting. "Our next move," I replied, "is to make sure the whole galaxy hears our warning. Let them know that humanity's time has come and we're not backing down." That night, as I stood alone in the dim silence of my quarters, I thought of Earth, of the people who would one day look up at the stars and know that we'd fought for them, for their freedom. This wasn't just my war, or humanity's war, it was a war for every species that had ever felt the Empire's yoke. And if we were the ones to break it, so be it. In that silence, I made a vow. The silence on the bridge of the Resolute was unnerving. We just repaired the damage from the last skirmish, but the adrenaline from that victory had hardly faded when the Empire's message came through. It was early, with just the faint hum of machinery filling the air. The flickering lights and the burnt smell that lingered from our damaged consoles felt like fresh reminders of what we'd just survived. "Commander Kane, we're receiving a message from the Empire," Marquez said, her voice tense. JT glanced over, his brow raised in disbelief. "What do they want now?" I stepped toward the screen. "Play it." The image crackled to life, revealing a tall, pale-skinned alien with icy blue eyes and the insignia of the Empire emblazoned across his chest. His smile barely touched his lips, only enhancing his cold gaze. "I am Envoy Lurin of the Galactic Empire," he announced, voice like smooth steel. "I come with a message of peace. The Empire acknowledges humanity's strength and resilience and wishes to avoid further bloodshed." JT gave me a skeptical look, though I could see the flicker of hope in his eyes. "Think they mean it?" I didn't trust the Empire for a second. This sounded more like a trap than an olive branch. They had a way of twisting their words, turning peace into something worse than war. The envoy continued, that hint of smugness never leaving his face. "If humanity surrenders a few select territories, we will withdraw our forces and grant Earth autonomy under the protection of the Empire. This is a generous offer that would secure your people's future without needless conflict." JT furrowed his brow, mumbling under his breath. "It sounds like they're finally seeing sense. They're hedging their bets, JT. They're on the edge of full-scale war, and they want us softened up, not surrendered. It's a trick." "Maybe," JT replied cautiously, "but maybe it's a real chance to spare our people." The envoy waited, as if savoring our reaction. Then, he spoke again, his gaze now fixed directly on me. "Commander Kane, I understand you're a pragmatic man. Perhaps you can appreciate that the Empire's offer is more than reasonable. There is a place for humanity within the Empire on terms that will guarantee your people's survival." My fist clenched at his words. The arrogance, the entitlement the Empire thought they could subjugate us with a few honeyed words. "We're better off on our own," I said, voice cold. "If this is your best attempt at peace, you've wasted your time." Lurin's gaze shifted toward JT, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Lieutenant Thorne, I can see you're a voice of reason. Surely you understand the value of compromise." JT met his gaze, but kept his voice steady. "My loyalty is with my commander, and with my people." "Then consider this, Commander Kane," Lurin replied smoothly, his expression hardening. "Your defiance will only bring ruin. The Empire's patience is not unlimited." "Then you've come to the wrong place, Envoy. Humanity doesn't kneel." The envoy's smile faded, replaced by a steely, cold glare. With a curt nod, he signaled for the transmission to cut off, and the screen went dark. As I turned away from the console, JT grabbed my arm. "Are we making the right call, Eli? The Empire's forces outnumber ours 10-1. This isn't a fight we can win with bravado." I looked him squarely in the eye, unflinching. "Would you rather live under their rule? We have the chance to fight for our freedom, JT. I won't let them take that away." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but there are lives on the line, not just ours. I hope this isn't a mistake." With that, he walked away, leaving me to contemplate the weight of our decision. But the time for doubt was over. Humanity had made its stand, and we would see it through. A few hours later, Envoy Lurin's ship drifted from the Resolute, returning to the Empire's fleet. I stood on the bridge, watching as it vanished into the dark. "Commander, we've picked up an alert from the outer colonies," Marquez said, voice strained. I turned to her, feeling a chill spread through my veins. What is it? She looked at me, dread in her eyes. Empire forces have launched an assault on Colony 8. My grip tightened around the edge of the console. So this was their idea of peace: distract us with empty words while they struck at our most vulnerable. JT was by my side, his expression hardening as he processed the news. We have to go, Eli. We can't let them do this. We're not leaving them to the Empire's mercy, I said. Prepare the fleet. We're going to liberate Colony 8 and make them regret their betrayal. As JT relayed the order, I felt a renewed surge of anger. They thought they could break us with trickery, that they could snuff out humanity's resistance before it even began. But they were wrong. We would meet them head-on, and they would know the price of underestimating us. The journey to Colony 8 was filled with a tense silence, the crew preparing for what would be one of our most important battles yet. When we arrived, the Empire's ships had already entrenched themselves around the colony, forming a blockade to prevent any escape. My heart pounded as I took in the sight. Civilians, families, innocent lives, they were trapped down there, and the Empire was using them as leverage. All ships, engage the blockade, I ordered. We're breaking through. Our fleet surged forward, plasma fire lighting up the darkness as we hammered the Empire's ships. Their blockade was formidable, their ships larger and more heavily armored than ours. But our strength lay in our agility, our resolve, and the knowledge that we were fighting for more than power or territory. I watched as JT coordinated the assault, directing our ships into a precise formation to punch through the enemy's defenses. Each shot landed with lethal precision, tearing through the Empire's ranks and sowing chaos among their ranks. The Resolute weaved through the fray, its guns blazing as we pushed our way closer to the colony. Every shot, every maneuver was a calculated strike against an enemy that had underestimated us for far too long. A signal flashed across the console: distress calls from the surface. Civilians were under attack, Empire forces overrunning the colony's limited defenses. We need to get ground teams down there, JT said, his voice laced with urgency. The colonists can't hold out on their own. Understood. Marquez, open a path for our transports. We're getting our people out. The battle raged as our ground teams deployed, slipping through the gap in the Empire's defenses. We fought to protect every inch of that path, buying precious time for our soldiers to secure the colony and evacuate the civilians. On the ground, the battle was brutal. The Empire's forces were relentless, fighting for every building, every street. JT and I joined the ground assault, pushing through the firefight with grim determination. The Empire's soldiers fought viciously, using every advantage they had to keep us back. But we pressed forward, step by step, driving them away from the civilian shelters and securing a path to safety. When the last of the Empire's forces fell back, the colony was ours again. The air was thick with a scent of scorched earth, but the civilians were safe. We had defied the Empire's treachery, and we had won. Back on the Resolute, I opened a broadcast to every channel the Empire monitored. They needed to hear our message. This is Commander Kane of the United Human Defense Fleet. Your envoy came to us in the guise of peace, only to attack our people. Humanity will not forget this betrayal, and we will not forgive. The transmission cut, and the silence that followed felt as heavy as the battle we'd just fought. JT met me later in the dim, quiet halls of the Resolute, his face etched with exhaustion and something else, a wariness that hadn't been there before. Eli, are we doing the right thing? He asked, his voice softer than usual. Every time we push back, they hit harder. How far are we willing to go? I met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. I knew he was thinking about the cost, about the lives lost, and the lives that might still be lost if we kept pushing. We're doing what we have to, JT, I replied. The Empire won't stop until humanity is broken or gone. If we don't fight now, we'll never be free. He nodded, but the doubt lingered in his eyes. I don't want to see us lose everything in the name of vengeance. I placed a hand on his shoulder, giving it a firm squeeze. We're fighting for our people, JT. For our freedom. That's worth any price. He nodded slowly, though I could see the conflict in his expression. But for now, he was with me, and that was enough. As I looked out at the stars beyond the bridge, I knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return, angrier and stronger. But we would be ready, and when they came, they would find humanity waiting, unbroken and unyielding. The war room was silent, a tension so thick it could have been cut with a plasma knife. Holographic displays flickered with tactical maps, showing the Empire's controlled sectors like open wounds across the galactic expanse. Representatives from half a dozen alien species sat around the circular table, their various appendages and communication devices betraying a mix of hope and hesitation. I stood at the center, my fingers tracing the projected star charts. Each point of light represented not just a strategic target, but a chance to strike at the heart of an empire that had subjugated countless civilizations. Sector Gamma 9 is our primary target, I announced, my voice cutting through the murmurs. This supply station is the Empire's primary logistics hub for their western expansion. Destroying it will cripple their ability to maintain control over 3 neighboring star systems. Nerevex, the Xyrillian delegate, shifted uncomfortably. Her translucent tendrils coiled nervously around her communication device. Commander Kane, the risk is significant. Our intelligence suggests the station is heavily defended, with multiple layers of planetary and orbital shield systems. JT, standing beside me, nodded. Which is precisely why they'll never expect a coordinated assault from multiple fronts. The room was a testament to how far we'd come. Humanity, once considered a minor species barely worth the Empire's notice, was now the rallying point for a coalition of races who had suffered under Imperial rule. Each delegation represented years of careful diplomacy, of building trust where the Empire had only sown division. Dr. Adams, who had been quiet until now, cleared his throat. Eli, may I suggest we review the potential civilian casualties? Our last 2 operations have already strained our allies' trust. I knew what he was really saying. The cost of war wasn't just measured in destroyed ships and lost soldiers, but in the trust we were burning through with each aggressive move. The Empire doesn't consider civilian lives, I responded, my tone leaving no room for argument. Every station, every supply line, every piece of infrastructure supports their machine of oppression. If we hesitate, we lose everything. JT caught my eye, and I could see the conflict brewing behind his steady gaze. He'd been my closest confidant throughout this war, but lately the distance between us was growing. Where I saw necessary action, he saw mounting risks. The holographic display zoomed in on Sector Gamma 9. The supply station was a massive construct, looking like a metallic spider web suspended in the void of space. Defense platforms surrounded it like deadly thorns, each capable of obliterating a mid-sized fleet. We'll need a coordinated assault, I continued. The Xyrillian stealth ships will create initial disruption, targeting communication arrays. Simultaneously, our human squadrons will punch through the eastern defense grid while the Corellian artillery provides cover. Nerevex's translator clicked softly. And if our losses exceed acceptable parameters? I met her gaze directly. Then we adjust, but we do not retreat. As the meeting concluded, the various delegates filed out, leaving behind a residue of uncertainty. JT approached, his steps measured. You're pushing them hard, Eli, he said quietly. These allies aren't just resources. They're sentient beings with their own stakes in this conflict. I turned, feeling the familiar surge of determination. Every species here has suffered under the Empire. This isn't just our war anymore, it's a liberation. Dr. Adams joined us, his medical bag slung over his shoulder. Liberation and vengeance are 2 different paths. Commander, I'm concerned we're blurring those lines. Before I could respond, a priority communication flashed on the tactical display. An urgent message from our forward reconnaissance teams. The Empire was on the move. The night before the assault was unlike any we'd experienced. Our makeshift base hummed with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Maintenance crews worked on ships, engineers ran final calibrations, and soldiers checked and rechecked their equipment. In the command center, holographic displays tracked the Empire's fleet movements. They were predictable, which made them dangerous. Years of unchallenged dominance had made them complacent, but also ruthlessly efficient. JT found me reviewing the final assault plans. "You know this is more than just a strategic strike, right?" he said, his voice low. "This is a statement. We're telling the Empire we're not just fighting, we're hunting." I didn't look up from the display. Sometimes, the only language oppressors understand is force. He sighed, a sound that carried years of accumulated weariness. "And what happens after? When we've destroyed their station, disrupted their supply lines, will that be enough?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications we both understood, but were reluctant to fully articulate. Dr. Adams entered, his presence always bringing a sense of measured calm. "The medical teams are ready. We're anticipating significant casualties, especially among our allied forces." "We've minimized risks as much as possible," I responded, my fingers dancing across the tactical display, adjusting approach vectors and attack formations. "Minimized?" JT's laugh was bitter. "We're launching a full-scale assault on a heavily fortified Imperial installation. There's nothing minimized about this." As dawn broke, or what passed for dawn in the cold vacuum of space, our coalition fleet assembled. Ships of varying designs and capabilities formed a mosaic of resistance. Xyrillian stealth vessels with their near-invisible hulls, Corellian artillery platforms that looked like floating fortresses, and our human squadrons, sleek and determined. The first phase of the attack was almost beautiful in its precision. Xyrillian ships, using technology that bent light around their hulls, slipped past the Empire's initial sensor grids. Communication arrays erupted in cascading explosions, creating momentary blindness in the Imperial defenses. "All units, this is Commander Kane," I broadcast across all channels. "Initiate attack pattern Delta. Hit them fast, hit them hard." Our human squadron struck from the eastern approach, plasma cannons creating brief, brilliant eruptions against the station's shields. The Corellian artillery provided a constant, thunderous barrage that made the very fabric of space seem to tremble. The battle was chaos incarnate. Imperial defense platforms, massive and seemingly impenetrable, began to crack under our coordinated assault. For every ship we lost, we took 3 Imperial vessels with us. But the cost was becoming clear. "Commander, we're losing the Xyrillian Third Wing," JT's voice cut through the tactical noise. "Their shields are collapsing." I watched dispassionately as another Allied ship transformed into a brief, beautiful explosion. "Redirect support squadrons. We cannot stop the assault." Dr. Adams, monitoring casualty reports, looked up with a mixture of horror and resignation. "Eli, we're burning through our Allied support faster than we anticipated. At this rate, we'll have no coalition left after this battle." "Survival requires sacrifice," I responded, my eyes never leaving the tactical display. When the Imperial supply station finally began to break apart, it was like watching a mechanical beast slowly die. Sections of the massive structure separated, venting atmosphere and debris. Our sensors indicated massive internal explosions. We'd hit something critical. Victory, however, tasted like ash. As the dust settled, metaphorically speaking, in the vacuum of space, the true extent of our losses became apparent. Nearly 40% of our Allied ships were destroyed or critically damaged. The Xyrillian delegation had been decimated, their once proud stealth fleet reduced to scattered remnants. JT approached me in the aftermath, his flight suit scorched and torn. "Was it worth it, Eli? This station, it's important, but at what cost?" I turned, seeing the accusation and pain in his eyes. "Every Imperial resource we destroy brings us closer to freedom." "Freedom?" Dr. Adams interjected, his calm voice cutting through our tension. "Or revenge, because from where I'm standing, they're starting to look remarkably similar." The war room felt different now. Where once there had been unity and purpose, now there was doubt. The Allied delegates looked shell-shocked, the enthusiasm of our coalition replaced by a grim calculus of survival. Nerevex, her translucent form now flickering with what could only be described as exhaustion, approached. "Commander Kane, we need to discuss the future of our alliance. These losses are unsustainable." I knew what was happening. Our victory was being overshadowed by the brutal arithmetic of war. Each successful strike was becoming more costly, not just in ships and lives, but in the fragile trust we'd built. "We'll regroup," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "Our next target is deeper in Imperial territory. We'll strike before they can recover from this blow." JT stepped forward, something fundamental shifting in his posture. "No," he said simply, "I can't follow this path anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm saying that if we continue like this, we become no better than the Empire. We're destroying the very thing we're claiming to protect." His voice was steady, resolute. Dr. Adams placed a hand on JT's shoulder, a gesture of quiet support. The choice was becoming clear. Continue down this path of total war, burning through allies and resources in a quest for absolute victory, or find another way. A way that preserved not just humanity's survival, but its soul. As I looked around the war room, at the weary faces of beings who had risked everything to stand with us, I realized the next battle might not be fought with weapons, but with something far more complex. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, I wasn't certain we were winning. The observation deck of the Resolute was quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems. I stood there, watching distant stars blur past as our fleet moved into position. JT's words from our confrontation still echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of what was at stake. 3 days had passed since our assault on the Empire's supply station. 3 days of tense discussions, wavering alliances, and the growing realization that we were at a crossroads. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Dr. Adams's voice broke through my thoughts. He stood beside me, his weathered face reflected in the reinforced viewport. "They're gathering their forces," I said, gesturing to the tactical overlay showing Empire fleet movements. "They think we're weakened, divided." "Aren't we?" he asked quietly. Before I could respond, the door slid open. JT entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Commander, we've received new intelligence from our deep cover operatives within Empire space." I turned, noting how he'd used my title instead of my name. "Report." "The Empire's moving their entire defensive fleet to protect their core systems. They're leaving their outer territories exposed." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "They're scared, lie. For the first time in centuries, they're actually scared." The tactical display shifted, showing the massive movement of Empire ships. Their fear was making them predictable, desperate to protect their center, while abandoning their edges. "Get everyone to the war room," I ordered. "All delegates, all commanders. It's time to end this." The war room was packed, filled with representatives from every allied species. The tension from our last battle still lingered, but there was something else now, a spark of possibility. "The Empire is making a critical mistake," I began, activating the holographic display. "They're consolidating their forces, trying to create an impenetrable defense around their core systems. But in doing so, they're showing us their weakness." Nerevex's translator clicked rapidly. "We've sustained heavy losses, Commander. Many of our ships are still undergoing repairs." "I know," I said, my voice softer than usual. "And I owe you all an apology. My obsession with destroying the Empire's power has cost us dearly. But now we have a chance to end this war without sacrificing everything we've built." JT straightened, his interest piqued. "What are you suggesting?" "We don't need to destroy the Empire's core," I explained, zooming in on the outer territories. "We just need to liberate enough of their subjected worlds to make their position untenable." Dr. Adams leaned forward. "A revolution from the edges." Exactly. The Empire's authority relies on fear and the illusion of absolute control. If we can break that illusion, I let the thought hang. The holographic display showed dozens of systems, all largely undefended now, worlds that had lived under Empire control for generations, waiting for a chance at freedom. We split our forces, JT continued, catching on to the strategy. Small, fast strike teams hit multiple systems simultaneously, not to destroy, but to liberate. The room buzzed with renewed energy. This wasn't just another assault, this was something different, something that spoke to why we'd formed this coalition in the first place. Each species knows best how to approach their own worlds, I added. We coordinate, but we let each fleet operate independently. No more sacrificing allies for tactical advantages. Nerevex's tendrils swayed thoughtfully. A revolution of 1,000 cuts. The Empire's worst nightmare, Dr. Adams mused. Not a war of destruction, but a war of liberation. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of coordinated strikes and precision operations. Our fleets moved like shadows through Empire space, appearing just long enough to disable key control systems and arm resistance fighters before vanishing again. The Xyrillians used their stealth technology to infiltrate communication hubs, spreading the word of rebellion. Corellian ships provided covering fire for escape vessels carrying political prisoners. Human squadrons darted between systems, striking at Empire peacekeeping forces with surgical precision. Each liberated world became a beacon for others. The Empire's grip began to slip, system by system, planet by planet. I stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching as another Empire garrison surrendered to local resistance fighters. JT worked beside me, our earlier tension replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Incoming transmission, Marquez announced. It's from the Empire's High Command. The screen flickered to life, showing a face I recognized: Admiral Varric, the same commander who had dismissed us so arrogantly at the start of this conflict. Commander Kane, he said, his voice strained. The Empire requests. Negotiations. JT glanced at me, worry flickering across his face. This was the moment that would define us. How we handled victory would be as important as how we'd fought for it. Admiral, I replied, measuring my words carefully. We're willing to discuss terms, but understand this. The age of Empire dominance is over. Each world must be free to choose its own path. The Admiral's expression tightened, but he nodded. Perhaps it is time for a change. After the transmission ended, JT turned to me. Well, that's not quite how I expected the Empire to fall. Not with a bang, but with the quiet realization that they can't hold on to power forever, Dr. Adams said, joining us on the bridge. I looked out at the stars, thinking of all the worlds that were tasting freedom for the first time in generations. We still have work to do. Helping these worlds rebuild, establishing new alliances, ensuring the Empire keeps its word. But we'll do it right this time, JT said, clasping my shoulder. Together, as equals, not conquerors or liberators, but partners in building something new. The hard part's just beginning, Dr. Adams warned. Building is always harder than fighting. I nodded, feeling the weight of victory settle onto our shoulders. Then we'd better get started. There's a galaxy out there waiting to write its own story. Months later, I stood in the newly established Council of Free Worlds, watching representatives from dozens of species, including some from reformed Empire worlds, work together to forge a new future. The flag of the United Human Defense Fleet flew alongside those of our allies, no longer just symbols of resistance, but of cooperation and hope. JT joined me, grinning. Not bad for a species the Empire once called primitive, eh? We learned from their mistakes, I replied. They thought power came from control. We proved it comes from freedom. As I watched the council session unfold, I thought about how close we'd come to losing our way, to becoming what we fought against. But in the end, humanity had helped chart a different course, not just for ourselves, but for every species that had dared to dream of freedom. The Empire's flag no longer flew over subjugated worlds. Instead, 1,000 different flags flew, each representing a people free to choose their own destiny, and perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. "So," JT asked, "what's next for the hero of the revolution?" I smiled, thinking of all the work still ahead. "There's a whole galaxy out there, JT, and this time we're exploring it as equals, not conquerors or rebels." Sounds like quite an adventure. "The best kind," I agreed. "One where we all write the story together." The stars stretched out before us, infinite possibilities in their light. The war was over, but our journey was just beginning. And this time, we would make sure it was a journey worth taking.